You are now listening to The Jason Damico Show.
Greetings, folks. Welcome back to The Jason Damico Show. So happy to have you here. And special thanks to all of our great distributors out there with Simplecast, getting us out to YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Rumble, and now Telegram, which is great. And as I said before we started rolling, this is surreal for me. This is somebody who has been a real inspiration in my life and has made a huge difference for me. And a lot of you tuning in probably have heard of the name. But our guest is a fitness YouTuber, entrepreneur, and coach who has been actively mentoring a generation of young men internationally since 2007, training them how to become the strongest versions of themselves. With over 2.4 million subscribers combined on YouTube, his students refer to him admirably as the king of making men strong. He is the founder of the famous Strength Camp Gym, originally based out of St. Petersburg, Florida, as well as an avid practitioner of bioenergetics, active meditation, and strongman training. Please welcome to the show, Elliott Hulse.
Thank you for having me.
It is so great to have you. And wow, there's so much to cover. I don't know how we're going to cover it all within an hour, and that's fine. We're just gonna start from the beginning stages. I think we're gonna have great conversation, and it's just such a blessing and honor to have you on. As I said in kind of my Vmail pitch, I've been following you for quite some time, and you've made a huge impact on my life. So I want to just first, before we get into things, sincerely thank you for everything that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank the Lord, because I don't know you. And so it was somehow by someone else that I got in front of you, and I can't take full credit.
Amen. Amen. So your beginning stages, you obviously were into sports at a young age. I was curious to find out and kind of dive in a little bit more into your childhood per se. Mm-hmm. Any proclivities that were going on early on that kind of ignited your spirit, as far as you've talked about being a beta male early on and how this journey kind of happened for you? Was there anything that really happened, and what was it that happened where maybe there was a calling perhaps at one point, or was it really just sports? Like, kind of walk me through those beginning stages of your youth and how you turned into who you are today.
Well, I have to begin by saying that I have a alpha male father, a very strong, disciplined, involved father. And that's sort of a gift today. We don't have too much of that. Not only that, my father's from Belize, a different country. So he didn't grow up with the gynocentric brainwashing that most of our dads, I myself included, to my children. But, a lot of the dads that my friends had. My dad was just a hard-nosed jungle man. And he lived by the law of the jungle, and he raised us the same way. I resented him as a result, because I wanted Nickelodeon dads. I wanted my neighbor's dad, who was, fat and kind of funny and didn't really pressure the kids too much to do anything. I would have traded any day. But, my dad's DNA, his essence, and his teachings live in me today. I was also fortunate enough to have my mother's brother, my uncle, lived with me very early when I was young. And he was also from Belize, but when he came here, he was getting his butt kicked a bunch in Brooklyn. So he started doing martial arts. And so he was a black belt in Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. He ran marathons. He did gymnastics. And then about the time when I was a kid, he lived with me. So he taught me how to train. I was like 4 or 5 years old. Wow. He had us in the basement. Me and my brothers, we were doing push-ups, sit-ups, climbing ropes, kicking bags. He used to like chop bricks with his hands. He'd do like these Kung Fu flips and stuff like that. So, I between those two men, they really infused a solid dose of healthy masculinity in me. Of course, it was a seed and it needs some time to flourish. But those two men have been tremendous blessings in my life. When I turned 14, my uncle started a bodybuilding, and he became a personal trainer back in 1993 before it wasn't even a thing. Now everybody's a fitness coach, but back then it was like, it was weird. What do you mean? You show people how to work out? That's how you make a living? And he did that. And so he took my brother and I under his wing and showed us how to lift barbells to get bigger and stronger for sports, for football. And so I'm blessed with great genetics, great upbringing, and training with the barbell that allowed me to excel in, a lot of different areas in my life, except school. I wasn't really like a good student.
So college years come around, and if I remember correctly, I remember you talking in a numerous amount of your videos about college sports, football, and some partying that was going on at one point. I know that you'd be sitting there over a weekend, and it would take about to Tuesday or Wednesday to recover. I remember hearing some of these stories on some of your YouTube videos years ago, and it seemed like football was going to be kind of the main route. Expand on that. Was that the case? And then if so, was there any again, I keep going to the word proclivity. Was there a proclivity towards, maybe this just isn't enough for me? Am I searching for more? Was that there? And if so, when did that happen?
It's so funny. Like in high school, I found my greatest loves in life. I met my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. I was playing football, which was my passion. And I was lifting weights, which was my vocation. So I basically was handed my path, my wife, and my vocation, all in the 4 years of high school. And so when you ask me if it was not enough for me, it was everything I would ever want for the rest of my life. And I was great. I was great at all three of them. I love being with my girlfriend at the time. We basically practically married from the time we were in high school because we just spent all the time together.
Wow.
And then with football, I was built for football. Football, they say, is not a contact sport. It's a collision sport. And I run head first into things. Metaphorically and literally, I just ram my head into shit. So I destroyed all my opponents by smashing them with my helmet. That was like back then it was okay. But I think you get, like, now you'll get penalized and fined. You can get kicked out of football now for that. Right. But I was the king of smashing people's faces with my helmet. Bang! I prided myself in having the most scarred up helmet. It's probably why I have brain damage now. I had scarred up helmet, like all the chips, paint would come off. It'd be all scratched up. And so it was just, for me, it was like a badge of honor to have the ugliest helmet because I was constantly smacking people with it. So between that and then weightlifting, which was, the other 9 months or 8 months out of the year, my life was packed. And so once I graduated college, I continued studying exercise science. That's the only time I really actually got good at school. I studied exercise science for a little while. I was preparing to go into the Marines as an officer.
Interesting.
And the Twin Towers got knocked down. It was 9/11. And so I was preparing to get shipped off. That's what I was thinking I was going to do. But different turn of events or fate would have it different. And because I was going to go away, I married my girlfriend at the time. And so we got married really early. I was like 23. I was 23. She was 22. And we got married really early. And the football thing at this point, the football thing didn't pan out because I'm like a foot too short to play football. But I was into fitness. I was into all kinds of really cool things until I found strongman, maybe about 5 years later.
And with your entrepreneurial spirit, how did that come about? Was that kind of early on, when creating Strength Camp and that successful brand?
Yeah. Again, it's like one of these things like I was just built for, and like fate just handed me. I remember being like in 4th grade. Now, mind you, this is like 1986, right? Now we have like all the entrepreneurs on Instagram and everybody's an entrepreneur. But I literally remember reading about the French, I think it was the French Revolution or something, but it was some French chapter in our social studies book when I was like in 6th grade, and the word entrepreneur showed up. And we had to define that. I was like, I never heard this word before. It's a weird word. I still can't spell it. and it was someone who works for themselves by finding what the market needs and giving it to them for a price. I was like, wow, really? I mean, I never heard of the concept before in my life. Like, what do you mean you don't have a job? You create your own job. It was in my head, but I'm like in 4th grade, so I'm not thinking too much about it. And then when I was in 9th grade, my uncle showed up one day. My uncle was an accountant. Same uncle I was telling you about. He showed up one day with a gym bag and a basketball. And he says, I quit my job. And, everybody's like, what are you talking about, Uncle Elroy? My mom and sister was like, all worried, like, oh, what are you doing? You quit your job. He says, you don't understand. I now work for myself, training people in the gym as a personal trainer. So I was like, let me get this straight. So you go to the gym? And he's like, yep. And I go whenever I want. I make up my own schedule. If I don't want to work, I don't work. And I'm like, and you just show people how to lift weights? You just work out with people and they pay you? He's like, yeah, that's right. So not only you have all the autonomy to do what you want, you charge your own rates, so you get paid whatever you want to get paid, and you get to do cool stuff like hang out in the gym all day. And so my mind was blown. So I was probably about 13, maybe at the time, 14.
Yeah.
I was like, once again, my fate was sealed. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And so it never, ever crossed my mind ever after that I'd be marrying this girl, doing this job and living this life. And here I am, 20 years, 30 years later.
That's great. That's great. So it just manifested. It's like the Lord just kind of dropped this at you at an early age, and it really played out in a way that was just so him, which is really cool.
Right. I can't take credit. I have a big ego, by the way. I love taking credit. I love being the guy. But I look back on my life and I didn't have this humility to get here. This is just me looking back and saying, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. This has literally just been the path that's unfolded in front of me. Now, I've had inclinations towards things. Like when I saw my uncle be a personal trainer for the first time, I was like, oh, that's it. But it wasn't like I had to make it happen. It was just what was revealed to me about my life.
That's so powerful. When you started building the brand, talk to me a little bit about YouTube. What was the inspiration behind starting to put the videos out? And the earliest dates that I remember seeing you kind of show up with the guy on the scooter in the background, making all that noise while you're taping and self-taping. The scooter guy, I remember that guy, and the garbage guy. Those early days, what was that like as far as the inspiration behind just putting out those videos? Did you feel like you were on to something, or was it more of I'm going to follow my gut with this? Where was the inspiration for that?
So you found me in 2013, but I made my first YouTube video about 7 years before that.
Wow.
I made my first YouTube video the year YouTube came out, and I didn't know anything about it or what I was doing. I just knew that if the people who were coming to my boot camps, my workouts, I called them strength camp.
Right.
I had a van and I would train people out in the park with, sandbags and tires and train guys and athletes. And it was really cool. And I was like, this has a lot of visual appeal.
Yeah.
I knew marketing too, because I studied marketing. Not that I studied it like in school, but I bought a bunch of marketing books and courses when I became a personal trainer. And so I knew that it had visual appeal. So I started filming the workouts. I had like a handheld camera with a tape in it. That's how old it was. And I would film the workouts that the guys were doing in the park so that they could share it with their friends. So that they could say, hey, check this out. This is what I was doing last night at this workout. And so the whole purpose was that I would send it to them, and then they would share it with their friends. And it worked. It got me some referrals. Little did I know, you got to remember now, there's no such thing as an influencer back then. There's no
Right.
such thing as a YouTuber or social media celebrity. This shit doesn't exist. It's not in my consciousness at all.
Right.
But by and by, I started to notice that people are watching the videos that are not coming to my gym. In other words, wow, there are a lot more views here than clients. So how are people watching this? And so, I discovered that, YouTube is a sort of a search engine. I never consumed YouTube until maybe a few years ago. I just used it as a marketing tool. So I didn't get it. I didn't get why people watched YouTube. It's so funny. I didn't understand why people watch YouTube. And I didn't understand how to use YouTube. I just knew that I uploaded these videos and eyeballs were going to them. People were seeing them. So around the same time that I opened my gym, I also became familiar with ebook publishing.
Right.
So I started publishing ebooks on those. I started publishing ebooks and I learned how to build an email list. This was, I met the guy that coined this phrase squeeze page. It was like, 2007. His name is Matt Basak. And so I built squeeze pages with HTML and I'd build email lists and I would sell them my football workout book or my muscle building workout ebook. And I would sell those books. And then I realized that all these people watching me on YouTube might buy my books too.
Right.
So I started putting links in my description and it was like mind blowing. Wow. I put the link in the description and I sold 3 ebooks today. So I caught on really quickly that, okay, this might be a way to make money. I wasn't thinking in terms of YouTube partnership it came a little bit later when I met the Hodge twins.
Just building the business.
It was all building an information marketing business.
Yeah.
So it went from getting guys to come to my workouts to, hey, wow, I can actually sell some ebooks here.
Very cool. Very cool. So really, it sounds to me like the traction began to, it's like a snowball effect for those first 7 years. Were folks uploading the videos to YouTube, kind of like pirating it, or when did you create your channel?
No, I had a channel.
Okay, you had it?
Yeah, it's the first thing I had to do. I created
Okay.
a Strength Camp YouTube channel, and I would just upload all my videos there.
Gotcha. That's amazing how it just kind of, there's no such thing as really overnight success. It takes years for, you just don't hear about it until you see somebody who's just, rising. I want to also kind of talk about along the lines of that. I have failure here and pushing through and persevering. What got you through some of those moments where it may have been really tough, just working on building the brand?
Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking about brands. See, that's it's not a new term, but it's a new concept, building an online brand. I was a direct response marketer. There wasn't a brand. I wasn't thinking about no brand. Just wanted to kind of like throw that out there, just give you the mindset of the time.
Sure.
But I was a young father. At this time, we probably had 2 children. We have 4 now, so babies were coming. My wife, we decided to keep her at home. That it would be better for her to raise the children than to put them in daycare.
Right.
And so the burden of financial performance was on me. We were at one point over $90,000 in debt, but not including student loans.
Wow.
Both had a lot of that. And so here I am, driving this old beat up van, which, by the way, would constantly run out of gas. And I'd end up having to push it in the middle of the street. No windows in it. Rain would just come in if it rained, because Florida, you don't know. It could be beautiful. Right. And then all of a sudden it rains. It'd just be raining in on me and stuff. And so, I was poor, but I never thought of myself that way. I knew I wanted more, but I was hustling because I had responsibilities. And here, and of course, everybody's life is different. I'm already betraying the fact that I'm from a bygone generation. But the idea that you need to wait to get married and have children, I think, is a scourge upon the motivation of man, because we spend most of our 20s and early 30s living it up, having fun, You know,
Right.
maybe I make some money, maybe I don't. Maybe I hang out, so basically wasting. And when I was 23, I was making babies. My wife was popping out babies and I had to put food on the table, and I didn't have time
Accountability.
to do stupid things. I didn't have time for effeminacy. I had to work so I could figure out how can I take care of my responsibilities. And I
Yeah.
can say for a fact that had I not had that fire under my ass, I wouldn't be where I am today, because I would have been just like everybody else. Reaching my sexual market value as a man out there, I'd probably have several babies, mamas. So I'm happy that I did it the way that I did.
Interesting. Really, really interesting. Bioenergetics. There was a video that you put out, Brain Slave No More, which obviously was somewhat controversial depending on what circle saw the video. I personally love that video. Got a lot of value out of that when that came out. And this kind of stems into the next phase of the conversation, bioenergetics, active meditation, philosophy. You're a practitioner of these and an avid reader, studier of them, and talk about them a lot. How did you discover bioenergetics?
When I was 24, after we had our first baby, we were living in New York, and we were in my father-in-law's basement, and it wasn't the life that I thought I'd be living at age 24. And I was like, so I don't want to say I was depressed, but I was in a state of confusion about my life. I'm like, what am I doing? And so I was searching. And one of the things I came across was I started reading. My brother gave me a book by a guy named Osho. And inside this book, he started talking about active meditations. He was like, meditations for the modern man is much more advantageous if he moves his body and breathes. He's got to get up, because if he sits down too much, his brain will race. He says you can't hope to have a modern man sit down and stop his brain racing, because he's addicted to it. It's imprinted on him from the time he's a child. You got to get him out of his head. And the only way you get someone out of the head is to get them into the body. So he had a form of meditation called dynamic meditation. Active meditation is a broad term. Dynamic meditation. And so I found a dynamic meditation workshop, 21-day workshop in New York City. And so I woke up 4:00 in the morning for 3 weeks straight, get on the train to New York City from Long Island to take this dynamic meditation class. And I'm not going to get into it now because I made enough videos making a fool of myself, breathing and jumping and huffing and puffing and shouting. But that's what it is. The first time I saw it or heard of it, I was like, this is amazing. Who doesn't want this? What man doesn't want to shout to the top of his lungs and beat his chest and, shake his shit? And so I was like, I'm in heaven. This is awesome. Free license to make as much noise as you want.
Yeah.
And so it was very, once again, commercial appeal. It was very alluring to me, and I knew it would be to others, but I wasn't even thinking that at the time, to be honest with you. I was thinking, how can I get the most out of this? And so when I did the class, and the instructor had a private session. You could hire her for private sessions. I was like, oh, wow, okay. So I hired her for a private session for something called Bioenergetic Pulsation. That's what she called it. Bioenergetic Pulsation session. I don't know anything about it. So I show up there and she has me bending backwards on my feet, with my mouth wide open and my eyes penetrating a wall. And she tells me, breathe. And I'm breathing like this for 10 minutes. I'm like freaking out. I'm like shaking. And she's like, just keep going, keep going. So I'm like, this is great because I like to train. So this is a challenge for me.
Yeah.
Like I could go run up a hill, or I could do this. I'm like, let me do this. So I was able to, really breathe that deep. And then, so you get to a breaking point with breathing. Anybody who's done any breath work, they know that you can reach transcendence. You'll get to a breaking point where all of a sudden, your ego dissolves.
Wow.
And so anyway, a very skilled bioenergetic analyst knows how to get you there. And so she had me go, after doing all this breathing, she had me go over to a mattress, lay face down on it, grab the edge of the mattress, and she says, start socking your hips. I'm like, what are you mean socking my hips? What is that? She says, hump the mattress. Well, I start humping the mattress, and she says, but keep the breathing. So I'm humping this mattress, and it won't but 5 minutes later, probably less, probably a minute later, I'm laughing like I haven't laughed since I was maybe 5 years old. Just belly laughing. Hurts. It hurts how much I'm laughing, but it's joyful. Tears are coming to my eyes.
Wow.
And I'm trying to stop, right? Because I don't know what's going on. I was like, what the hell? Nothing fun. I mean, it is funny that I'm humping the mattress, but I'm like, I don't think that's why I'm laughing. And so I'm trying to stop. I'm saying to her, like, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Like, but she's like, no, it's okay, keep going, just go with it. I'm like, all right, fine. So I just keep crying. But really, in my mind, I'm curious. I'm like, okay, I gotta find out what the hell just happened. So after I finish laughing, I say, okay, what happened? What was that? And she says, well, you had a bioenergetic release. You had energy that was trapped in your pelvis, which is your joy center, because somewhere someone may have told you that it's naughty to have good feelings down there. And so she sensed that I had this hang up from the assessment, the breathing that we did. And she said, so I just helped you release some of the energy that you had in the area. Well, I was like, well, that's freaking amazing. And I walked out of there glowing. Like, I was walking on clouds. I was like, wow, I haven't had that experience, that kind of joy in a very, very long time. Well, the rabbit hole goes deep. Many years later, I moved to Florida. I'm looking for more of the same. And I contacted her, and her name's Chrisana. She and I are actually very good friends now. And she said, no, I don't know of anything in Florida. You know, I literally like out here. And she's like, but you might want to look at Alexander Lowen's books. He's the founder of this form of therapy. And so I'm like, okay, great. So I go on Amazon and I buy a couple of I buy one book, A Language of the Body, and start reading this book. And I'm like, I'm usually a voracious reader, but whatever, I mean, I know what it is. The man is brilliant and he's a poet. He's a scientist and a lawyer and a poet. Like his writing is so easily consumable and enlightening that I ran through, like, he's got 13 books and I've read all 13 of his books. I've never read anybody's books like that, but I'm just devouring this guy's books. And then I get to, backtrack a little bit. After I finished reading this first book, I'm just kind of like examining the book, and I realize, oh, it's published in Florida. Bioenergetic and now Society of Florida or something. And it's in Alachua, which is near Gainesville, which is a 2-hour drive from where I lived. So I call the phone number on the book, and Dr. Glazier picks up. Dr. Glazier. And I end up doing 3 years of bioenergetic and analysis and therapy with the top student trained by Alexander Lowen. And then he died.
Wow.
So that's that rabbit hole.
It's so fascinating to hear kind of, how the knowledge has passed down. You've been channeling, and we all do this, rightfully so, learning and synthesizing. Me as an artist and an actor and in the entertainment industry, you learn from the greats and you synthesize it and pass it down to the next generation or to those around you, or just share. And it's really interesting to hear how you're just showing it in your own way. You're displaying it through your own life experience. And it's great to see how it just poured out into so many lives, including myself, because I think it was the RSD video way back with Owen Cook. And I was just so fascinated by the two guys that are sitting there with what exercise is that when you kind of stretch the dog belly exercise?
It's
the
called
softening.
the bow.
The bow.
Right. And that's the assessment tool, because it's also a tool, assessment tool that Chrisana had me do when I first met her and walked in the room that day.
Yeah. Amazing. I want to I'm going to try and do that every day. I've known about it for years. I'll do it once in a while just to kind of assess. It's amazing. And then when the vibration starts, sometimes it's just shockingly violent. It's like you can barely stand up. And it's just amazing how the body, how the energy can just be stored there for years on a cellular level in certain areas.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that it all comes from the work of Wilhelm Reich. And so I have a love-hate relationship with Reich. But one of the brilliant things he did, he was a brilliant man, but also created some bad things in our society. But one of the beautiful things that he discovered in his early work, kind of abandoned it to go do other things, was character structure. And so coming from the school of Freud, he would deal with patients on a psychopathological level, psychopathology, schizoid, oral, masochist, psychopath, narcissist. These are the terms that they would use to describe various psychological predispositions. Well, Reich discovered that these character or personality traits or psychological predispositions aren't just in the mind. He could look at a person's body and diagnose schizoid, oral, masochist, psychopath.
Wow.
Because the body takes on the form of the predominant habit within the body. Where do our habits come from? Well, our thoughts. So our psychological predisposition determines, number one, our breathing pattern. You look like how you breathe. Think about it. It only makes sense. If every breath is a rep, you're building muscle around the way you breathe. So your body will take that form. And so he discovered that rather than, which, I want to say instead of, not rather, because this is a far more superior form of therapy. And science is catching up now with a lot of the trauma release stuff that's, going on with these PTSD guys. He discovered that you get to the root of a person's issue not by talking to them about it. You can talk to your blue in the face, doesn't do anything. You change their breathing and release tension in their body that's holding them trapped in that repetitive pattern, right? Form equals function. So if you're built a certain way, you're gonna behave a certain way. If you keep getting the same results, well, maybe you need to be built a little differently. And that was his theory of, all Western breath work stems from Wilhelm Reich. He started trying to, just like Freud. It's so funny because Reich and Jung are two of Freud's polar opposite students, and they came up with brilliant things, but they also tried to do what Freud did, which was to medicalize psychology. It's a soft science, it's pseudoscience. You're not gonna boil it down to exacts, but Freud attempted because he wanted, that kind of prestige and notoriety. So Reich, both Reich and Jung were adopting a lot of things from religion and mysticism, both of the spirit, but then also of the body, a lot of shamanic stuff. And so Reich avoided, using terms like chi and prana, and these things that were from the East, even though they had been practicing these things. And so he came up with the term bioenergy. He called it orgone energy, right? Which is basically sex energy. He called it orgone because the movement in the body that produces or the movement in the body that's indicative of sexual energy waves like this. And he called that wave in the body like this, that it moves it from the head down to the tailbone, snake-like movement, the orgasm reflex, the orgastic reflex. Because when when you orgasm, you go unconscious and your body you could evoke an orgasm just by doing this, right? Because your body is going into that, it's sexual. But then also when you orgasm, your body goes into a spontaneous wave. It goes into a spontaneous wave. Now, and so he was convinced that the health of the individual could be determined by the smoothness of that orgastic wave. Herky jerky. So he spoke a lot about sex, like guys who they're just hip bangers, right? He says the hip banger is cut off from their spine, from the wave. And so it's really about restoring. All of his talk was about restoring orgone energy or the orgastic movement in the body. So he's not talking like Montauk Chia with a lot of these esoteric Eastern terms. He tried to medicalize it, by calling it orgone or bioenergy and the orgasm reflex and all kind of weird stuff like that.
Wild. And it's a great segue to one of the main themes of your content from what I've seen over the years, which is obviously masculinity and working with young men to just win at life, become the strongest version of themselves. And nice guy syndrome. It's something that you've been talking about for years, and would love to just kind of dive into that for a few moments. There's so much that you've covered on this topic on the internet. Folks can go, check out just YouTube, Elliott Hulse. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of videos on it, but would love to just talk about it for a few minutes here, as far as maybe from a cultural standpoint and the coupling of the cultural standpoint to individually how this has just become an issue. It's been an issue, and it seems to be on a exponential scale of becoming more and more of an issue.
Yeah. And it's the byproduct of weaponized sexuality. It's really what it is. And the purveyors of this, the creators of this, knew exactly what they were doing. And so you can look back as far as, or as near, because this has been going on for a long time, but as near as the Bolshevik Revolution, 1918. I think the 1918 is a prominent year in that. But this whole idea of creating communism in the East was a byproduct of Bolshevism. This is what they wanted to do: Marxism, Bolshevism, right. Stalinism, this egalitarianism, this whole idea that we could essentially become all equal. Well, it never really works that way. But the whole idea, the appeal was that we would all be equal. And this worked really well in Tsarist Russia, because the class differences were really taking a toll on the lower classes. So it was an easy sell in Russia and Eastern Europe, some Eastern Europe countries. It was a very easy sell to say revolution. So they killed the Tsar of Russia and then they had their whole, Bolshevik Revolution. And that unfolded as a result. And it was because, of the oppressed class. And so I think it was Engels, but of course he and Marx both understood that you revolutionize a society through class warfare. So in order to have class warfare, you have to have separate classes. Right. You have to have identity. Today we call it identity politics. Right. But it's basically identity politics. You have to be able to pit people against each other. Now, this form of revolution, they tried to spread west, but especially in America, it wouldn't take because of the burgeoning middle class. There was the gap between the rich and the poor in America was getting smaller and smaller because of our tremendous affluence. So there was no sense of oppression, even amongst the African Americans at the time. In the 1950s, African Americans were doing really well. Business, wealth, religion, family, intact families. In fact, they had more intact families than the whites, and there was less divorce. But then also feminism. And I know you're asking me about nice guys. And so feminism is a fruit of the same class warfare idea that they knew they had to import to the West in order to create revolution. And so guys like Antonio Gramsci and Mark Lukács went to business creating what we call cultural Marxism today. It's a cultural battleground. And so there are a couple of class distinctions that need to be highlighted so that we can pin them against each other. I mentioned white and black before, which is a farce. It's a lie. African-American blacks were doing very good when this was all enrolled and started doing worse after the so-called civil rights movement, right? That's when governments got involved. They started tearing down the family through welfare, injecting drugs into this. So blacks were doing much better before equality.
Yeah.
But then feminism, so I just bring that up because it's an example, but feminism is really what we're looking at in terms of where the hell does this nice guy syndrome come from? And it comes from this, well, Wilhelm Reich had a lot to do with this. It all really, well, it's been coming on, but it really peaked with the sexual revolution. It really
60s.
peaked with the sexual revolution in the 1960s by unleashing chastity or making sexual promiscuity cultural, which it was never was at the time. Right. Especially for women. Women were very conservative because they had to be, otherwise they were at risk, unlike men.
Right.
So prior to the 1960s, there was patriarchy to a strong degree, meaning fathers rule. And so the father was responsible for the purity of his daughter. And that's also a religious standpoint. So with the sexual revolution comes the removal of the father. That's a big part of it. The father has to be demonized and removed and demonized, dumbed down, turned into an idiot that has all the responsibility but no power, no authority in his home. And that is also a fruit of removing God the Father from our society. Because in a Christian home, the father receives his authority from Christ. You don't follow a man. A woman doesn't just follow a man. She follows Christ. She follows God's rule and God's order by following man. And women, this is just the way it had been for 2,000 years in the West and built Christendom. It works. And there was no oppression. There was just natural order. But all this was turned upside down mainly because of birth control pills, abortion, and easy divorce. Totally shifted the power dynamics, not to give the oppressed more power and the oppressor, his just dessert. Men and women were the oppressors, obviously.
Right.
But to pervert gender roles completely in order to destroy the family. This was Engels' his intention from the beginning. And if you read a lot of the early and feminists from the 18th century, or not this century, 20th century, they all assert the main goal of feminism is to destroy the family by removing the rule of the father. When they say smash the patriarchy, that's what they're saying. Patriarchy literally stands for rule of the father. So we have to remove the rule of masculinity. We have to remove masculinity from society. Why is this appealing? Well, number one, it's appealing to the leaders, because if there's no men, there's no fight back. Women will follow. Women are very easily to manipulate because they're not strong. And that's not a knock against women. It's not in their nature to stand up and fight against tyranny. But if men are subservient, weak, and effeminate, then you do that partially by making the women into men, teach them that they need to go be taxpayers, go be a strong, independent woman, go have a job. You can have sex like a man. You can kill your baby. You can sterilize yourself until you're 35 and your eggs are rotten, all in the name of empowerment. So you kind of do a flip-flop. You feminize the men by making them addicted to pornography, drugs. That's when weed became a big thing. Today we have, video games. We got all kinds of things that keep men sucked in and weak. But what really put the nail in the coffin was with contraception, because now we became simps. Every man that chases sex, sterile transient sex, is a half homo simp, half homosexual, because sterile transient sex is a byproduct of gay culture. That's, we even talk about the Greeks when they did that, right? Sterile transient sex. Let's bone each other, right? So it's homo behavior to be a promiscuous man. But also highly addictive to have sterile transient sex. Think about sex apps, these dating apps. I deal with men all the time that are addicted to dating
Right.
apps. There
Right.
was at one point a sense of pride because, I got out there and I got some sex. But it very quickly, just like with any drug, first time you get drunk, you feel like high and it's like, wow, I feel amazing. But then very quickly you realize the futility of it and how empty it is. And not only that, you become a slave to it. So when men become slaves to women because of contraception, now they become nice guys. Because instead of the women seeking the approval of men, the men are seeking the approval of women. So have you ever heard that women have the gateway to sex, but men have the gateway to relationships? So women had to appeal to men to be in a relationship with me, right? Because sex was inside the relationship. It wasn't free. Sex was inside. So it's like, oh, we got to negotiate this here. I want your sex, but you want my resources, or you want my lifestyle, you want my protection, you want me as a man. So we make an agreement. But when sex is outside of marriage, it denigrates everybody. Now the woman's value is lost because what? I don't need to do anything. I don't need to give you anything to have sex with you. In fact, neither did any of 50 guys last week have to do anything to have sex with you. You just spread your legs and it's free sex. So women's value completely lost. And a man's sense of dignity thrown out the window. You have no power as a man when you're giving away your sex. And these guys, unlike, it used to be that women would be, I watch my students and I watch my fans and I see it. It's not like I'm an expert in this. I'm just like watching them. I'm like, what's going on, guys? I know I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but one of the perversions that you see is that it's the men now today that are getting their hearts broken. The girls are they're boning and they're going. They have no responsibility and they have no ethics. And the guys are like, woo, I was in love. It's the weirdest thing to watch. They fall in love with the sex from this girl and then they go. So it's really screwed us up big time.
It's one of the greatest riffs and analysis that I've ever heard on that. Really, really glad that you went down the rabbit hole and we were able to document that. It's fantastic. Because it really combines the history and also the visceral aspect. I saw a video recently when I was doing some prep earlier today with writing notes and whatnot, and the sense of pride. Again, a lot of my listeners may not like this, but it is what it is. How pride has been injected into the culture. Pride parades, right, etc. I thought that was also an astounding just example and also summary of Lucifer and how the fall happened through the first sin. The first fall was through pride, right, and how it really, everybody falls short of the glory of God. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, we can't sit there and say, oh, well, here's the plank versus the splinter versus the plank parable, and it's very true. But it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting how it's just seeped in culturally.
Right. And pride. We have Pride Month. Yeah. Not realizing how diabolical that statement even is. And you know what's so funny? Pride Month used to be Father's Day month.
Wow.
Pride has overshadowed the father, and it's so poetic because it's exactly what it's meant to do.
Wow. I'm gonna shift for a second because I do want to cover a little bit of performance before we start wrapping up in a little bit. Psychology, performance psychology, sports psychology. I think it's incredibly important as far as on the field or on the field of life in general, preparing, working through that and setting PRs for yourself, whether they're in the gym or just in life in general. Your thoughts on that for a few minutes, any key takeaways for any of the young listeners out there with overcoming anxieties about performance.
Well, we can just go right back to what we spoke about before in terms of active meditation
Yeah,
and
great,
bioenergetics.
great.
You don't have to think. Listen, it's hard to, I think Einstein said that you can't solve the problem at the level at which it's created, right? You've got a mindset problem. You're not going to fix that with your mind any more than I could touch the tip of this finger with this finger, right? Or bite my own teeth. You just can't do it. And so you got to come from a different angle. And if you're trying to get rid of anxiety or depression, you can't think your way out of it. You've got to act your way out of it. You've got to move your way out of it. You got to breathe your way out of it. And so you see, I mean, Tony Robbins, he knows bioenergetics because he studied Alexander Lowen. I've seen him referenced in some of his books. What does he say? State, story, and then whatever, status. But it always begins with your state. If you're going to change something, you don't start with the story. You got to change your state.
Right.
You got to change the way you feel and then impress a new story. And so it just goes right back to the body.
It's great. That's great. Any work with positive affirmations over the years? Were you ever really into that? And if so, would love to hear just if anything stuck with you over the years where you saw some real progress with that and kind of positive programming.
I did. I have. And it's amazing. Again, it's a pseudoscience, but not only that, it's pretty logical, right? You don't take a rocket scientist to hear it and need proof because we've all experienced it personally. And it's biblical, right? Christ speaks of these principles and they're very evident throughout the Bible.
Right.
That the head is, like Christ says, he's the head of the church, and as a husband is the head of his wife. What is the head? The head is the planter of seeds. A man is a planter of seeds.
That's good.
All right. Where is he planting that seed? In the heart. When you plant the seed into a woman, she's your heart. She's a part of your body. You love her that way. You plant this, and then what does it do? It creates a child. Man, woman, child. Male, female, masculine, feminine manifestation.
Right.
And so it works in the literal, works in the figurative, and it works this way too. You plant seeds with your mind, unless someone else is planting seeds in your mind. But you can plant seeds with your mind. But where do you plant those seeds? You plant the seed of a thought into your feeling body, your emotional body, your feminine body, your heart. So affirmations make perfect sense because you could just talk nice to yourself. You could say nice things. You could say affirmative things and get absolutely nowhere. You're just talking to yourself. You're just fooling yourself. You're trying to fool yourself. You have to get into the feeling state. Once again, it goes right back to the body. That's why it makes so perfect sense to me. You have to get into the feeling state of the seed that you're hoping to plant. Because otherwise it won't be open. You got to seduce yourself in a way. Think about it like in terms of sex with a woman. You want to blow your load in this girl. You know that you want to put it in here and you want to pull the trigger. You want to have babies or whatever. But it's not so simple as walking around with a hard dick and trying to poke it. Come over here and poke it into somebody, right? With no warming up, no romance, no taking your time, turning down the lights, putting on some music, foreplay, fun. You see, all that is seducing. Why? Now, why do you do all that seducing? So that she softens and opens right up. That's what you want. That's when sex is pleasurable and profitable, when the woman is soft and wet and willing and open, right? And that's a process. You don't just go get that. You don't just do that. So it's the same thing with planting a seed in the feeling body of your heart. You have to stimulate it with good or you got to stimulate it with intentional feeling. What is the feeling that I want to seduce my heart with? Is it one of triumph, overcoming, success, winning, whatever it is, wealth, family? You take that image, but then you have to feel like, wow, even though I don't have these things in the outward world, I can see it. I can see my beautiful wife, and I can see my wealthy life, and I can see the great things I'm doing for others. I can see that. But then feel it. Wow, how amazing is it? And so you play mental images. How amazing is it to walk into the house and see my wife, and she's doing this and that, and these people are benefiting from it. So it's not just imagination, but it's the feeling of the imagination. Mental discipline is really what it is, because you could do it in the reverse, and most people are living in the reverse. They're thinking and feeling bad things. Most people, and here's the thing, bro, like, you're doing it. I'm saying this, and I'm sure some people are like, yeah, right, that's BS, but you're doing it. You're literally doing it right now, but in unconscious way.
Right.
How many times are you thinking, oh man, I'm not going to have enough money by the end of the month? Or, oh man, I might not be able to pay these bills. Or, oh man, she might divorce me. Or, oh man, the girl doesn't like me. Or, oh man, look how fat I am. Or, oh man, I'll never lose weight. You're not just saying that to yourself. Guarantee you're feeling something about that. And you know what you're doing? You're creating a baby, because you're fornicating, you're having sex with yourself about bad things. So you're gonna have bad babies as a result. You have all these bad results in your life. So might as well, it's happening anyway. And it's happening omnipresent. The media, the music, social media, friends, family, they're all planting shit in you. It's happening. So might as well put up a block and do it yourself. Say, wait a second, I'm getting brainwashed all day long. I know I'm being brainwashed all day long. I'm highly susceptible to brainwashing. I know that. I'm an impressionable person. So you know what I need to do? Guard myself against bad impressions and impress good feelings, or impress good things into my heart to get good things in my life.
That's great. It reminds me of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, talking about I think it's the transmutation process, where the feeling will evoke the manifestation. You first have to feel it, or it's in the process of feeling and creation coupling with the feeling.
Male and female. It can't just be heady. It's got to be body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your core values, as my camera decides to shut off on me, your core values, which are major. And it's funny because I actually had a dream about this a couple of nights ago, and I had to put it in the voice memo at 4 a.m. And it was crazy. We had this, we're talking, having the dialogue, and there was this clear message that basically, I actually got your core values without knowing your core values on the website. And then when I'm looking at the website, I saw the 3 core values that I talked about in my voice memo. So I don't know how that happened. It was just some sort of little prophetic download or something. But traditional masculine, the dream, it told me to talk about 3 things, which are masculinity, Christ, and the family. And your core values are traditional masculinity, Christ is king, protect the family.
Yeah.
Which I think are just the cornerstone of, and a great way to really kind of start capping off on this interview, is your core values in those 3 sectors and your future plans with those 3. And I'd love to also kind of talk about your testimony. If you could elaborate on that for a couple of minutes, I'd love to just kind of hear how that came about for you and how you became a believer. But we've talked about family, we've talked about faith, we've talked about masculinity, but those core values and where you see yourself pushing forward with what you're doing, with all the great work that you're doing.
Well, just like what we're talking about before, if you're ever going to get anything good in your life, you start with the head, right?
Right.
That's the planter of seeds. And so it's the same way in the world if you consider that the man is the head. If you don't get the man right, the rest of the world falls apart. If men aren't strong, women suffer, families suffer, society suffers. And we see what happens because women are strong today. So it's not about making women stronger. Women are stronger and everything sucks because they're not actually stronger. They're just more like men. A stronger woman is a woman that's more like a woman. You're fulfilling femininity to its highest degree, which is wife and mother. But the world doesn't want to hear that.
Right.
Instead, they want to hear women are strong, and of course, everything has been turned against men. I already spoke to you a little bit about this ideological subversion and whatnot. Even chemical attack. Our testosterone levels are in the toilet.
Yeah,
it's crazy. We're under all kinds of attack. But what do we have? We have a screwed up, diabolically disoriented world. Why? Because men are weak. No one can fix this but men. Now, Christ through men can bring the light into the world, but that's the only way. That's why the man is the head. So anyway, the point is that my mission, my work, my calling since day one, and it's so funny because I didn't make up this calling. I didn't create this calling. This is just what God did through me, and it's doing through me. And I'm just aware enough to look and say, oh, okay. I'm here to make men strong again. I make men strong. Fitness, business, women, whatever. What will make a man the kind of man that he needs to be in order to bring Christ's light to this world? Become the strongest version of himself. And when that happens, women will be happy, children will be happy, families will work again, won't have 70% divorce, communities will work again, but it starts with the individual man.
Absolutely. Real quick. Well, actually, your testimony, if you'd like to expand on that for a minute or two, was just curious to see.
I guess you're wondering how I became Catholic again. And so
yeah,
I was like many, I was baptized Catholic as a baby. And so now I understand the brilliance of infant baptism. I didn't understand it before, and I denigrated it like a lot of other people. But like most Catholics, I grew up not understanding the faith at all. In not only an anti-Christ world, but an anti-Mary world, which is an anti-Catholic world. The French Revolution, American Revolution, all these revolutions, not very different than the Bolshevik Revolution, just in degrees, was about destroying patriarchy. Catholic Church is Christendom. The West is patriarchy. And so in order to subvert Western society from even further back than the Bolshevik Revolution, we've got Freemasonry and Jewry and different systems of ideals that have crossed us. And so I was as anti-Christ as you could get, but a spiritual man, a God-seeking man. And so I was very religiously promiscuous. I was all kinds of different religions. I was interested in every single religion I could find. In fact, when I was in my second year of college, we got the internet for the first time, and there was something called Napster. And I was downloading Napster files of Alan Watts teaching me about Hinduism and Buddhism. I mean, this is like back in 1998, right? And so, you see Alan Watts on YouTube now, like people send them to me like they're teaching me something. I'm like, bro, I do Alan Watts when I was a kid. Before you was probably in diapers. But that's how far back I had been seeking. So always, in fact, I came into philosophy when I was like 12 years old because I picked up a book that said, "What are you?" And I've always been fascinated with trying to figure out what the hell am I? Because I'm a mixed race man living in America. So people are always asking me, "Elliott, what are you?" I'm like, I don't know. I better go find out. So I start reading scripture and literature and holy writings. Oh, wow. It turns out I'm a whole lot more than just the color of my skin. And so, yeah, I had been searching everywhere except my own backyard. You ever read that book, The Alchemist?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So it's about a journey, as all great tales are, a young boy. And he goes off on a journey, and the whole book is about his journey and all kinds of great things and bad things and stuff that happens to him. He finally gets where his destination is, and it turns out to be not what he thought it was. And then he goes back home and he finds his treasure right where he was daydreaming. And so it kind of like happened that way for me. I hit rock bottom. I was in a hard spot in my life about the age of 36, which I've discovered is cyclical. It's a pattern. And so there are crises every 12 years. And for me, it's every 12 years, it was right on time. Then I discovered it the third time around. I was like, oh, this is a pattern. But anyway, so it's an initiation. It's a opportunity for initiation. And I was initiated through God's prompting me to fast. He just laid it on my heart. He said, just stop eating, and I'll guide you. And so he stopped me I stopped eating. I fasted. I lost like 40 pounds. I got really skinny. I was healing some skin problems too. So it was like, I was doing it for my health and for my soul. And one day it just started flashing across my mind all of my malignant, sinful ways. I'm a prideful guy. I am. It's just my nature. I got a big ego. I like to be first. I like to be seen. And for the first time in a very long time, I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I'm a bad person. And because I had made excuses for so many years about this way I was living, sinful, right? I wasn't living a bad life. I wasn't like a criminal, but I wasn't a righteous man. And it's very easy. Father Ripperger says that sin darkens the intellect. And now I understand why, because when you sin, you have to convince yourself that sinning is okay so that you can keep doing it. And with each sin that you continue to perpetuate, you rationalize yourself into further and darker and deeper sin, so that you can't no longer see the light. And that's what a lot of us do. And I find myself down that route where I was, my intellect was darkened, and all of a sudden a light was turned on, and God was showing me like all the things you've been doing. Like, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. Back to when I was like maybe a teenager, I'm seeing all these things, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? And so I was guided to confess my sins. That's what God said. He said, go confess your sins. I'm like, okay, like to who? And then it dawned on me, I have the Sacrament of Reconciliation because I was baptized and confirmed as a Catholic when I was a kid. I don't know. My parents were doing it. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. I'm going to go. And so I had to go on Google. I don't know anything about Catholic churches. This was like 2019. And I look on Google. I'm like, okay. And then I had to go on YouTube and figure out, like, how do you do a confession? Because there are certain prayers. It's a ritual. It's a rites of passage in a way. And I learned all about it. I went there that day, and I almost walked out. It's almost like, man, Satan was holding on to me so tight. I was supposed to go in. There was a long line. The line stopped when I was at the front of the line, and the priest came out, and he's like, I have to do mass. He said, wait until after. I was like, damn it. Well, I got up and I walked out, and then something just grabbed me by my shirt, sat me back down in the chair, and I confessed my first sin, blew my eyes out, confessed like 35 years of all kinds of sin, and have been back ever since. Discovered how beautiful. It's not like I discovered the faith was beautiful and went back. It's like I just had to admit that I was Catholic. I didn't want to be Catholic. It wasn't like I chose that. It's like, damn, I guess I'm Catholic. All the searching, well, here I am. And then I discovered how beautiful the faith was. I was like, well, this is everything I've been looking for. It's got ritual, it's got ceremony, it's got meaning, it's got history, it's got Christ, it's got Mary.
Yeah.
So it like drew me back in, and then I started learning about it. I was like, wow, I love being Catholic.
That's great to hear. Happy for you. That's so great.
Yeah.
As we kind of, I wanted to ask you this real quick. Desert island workout. If you were stranded and you only could do 30 to 60 minutes a day, and you could have equipment or maybe no equipment, what would you do if you were stuck out there for 5 years? You could only do 30 to 60 minutes a day, the same exercise every day. What do you think it would be?
Swim.
That's easy. It's
yeah.
Great.
How the hell do I get off this damn island? I'd probably swim get a raft, put it out further, probably try to put an anchor, swim back the next day with another one, and just maybe see if I get my way back home, or at least get out to the middle of the ocean where a boat might see me. I'd have to get real good at swimming. That's what I would do.
That's good. That's good.
Either that, or of course, before that, hunting. I'd have to figure out how to catch stuff with my bare hands. So the workout would be hanging out up in a tree. I'd probably be like sharpening a lot of sticks. That'd be a workout, sharpening sticks.
Yeah.
And then sitting up in a tree, and I have to learn how to javelin throw. So a bunch of different things I'd have to do for survival. I wouldn't be doing fucking burpees.
I like to do one last thing at the end, which is the shootout section, where I just say a word that's related to the guest, and you just fire the first word back that comes to mind. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just kind of a fun little thing to do.
Yep.
Jim.
Jones.
Sweat.
And blood.
Strength.
Elliott Hulse.
It's good. Deadlift. Squat.
Ass to grass.
Yeah. I remember that. Bench press.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cardio.
I need more of it.
Florida.
Would never leave it.
Business.
It's doing all right. Could be better, but I'm starting all over again.
Last but not least, pizza.
Ugh. That means bloat and itchy and bad things, almost like beer.
Gotcha. I asked this to everybody at the end. If you could go back in time to your 15-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell him?
I tell him, don't worry about anything. It'll be all right. You don't have to do anything, buddy. Just keep showing up and you'll get there. Because I really didn't do anything. I just kept showing up. So I would tell him, relax. You'll be all right. No stress.
That's great. That's great. It's been an honor. Thank you so much again for taking the time to be on. And any last words?
No, this was cool, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you. You guys have been watching and listening to the Jason Damico show with special guest Elliott Hulse. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in. Don't forget to, if you haven't subscribed to Elliott yet, please do at elliottholse.com. You can find all of the social media there. He'll make you strong. He'll whip your ass even through the internet. I know he did for me. Yeah. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
That's
Peace.
Right.